Welcome to this video. In this video, we will discuss the new Rockwell Automation Control Logics vulnerability that is affecting the ICS industrial control systems. And the vulnerability is very critical because the Rockwell Automation modules they are used in almost every critical industry. And we will be discussing the two CVEs that have been disclosed by Rockwell Automation on this. And in this video, we will be mapping this vulnerability against the MITRE ATT&CK framework. So on July 12, two new vulnerabilities were disclosed by Rockwell Automation in its communication modules. These modules are designed to enable the communication between machines, IT systems, and remote chassis. And as you can see that IT systems, remote chassis, they can be found in almost every industry, and that is the reason, since these devices are used very widely in almost every industry, and Rockwell is a famous vendor for these devices. So the criticality of this vulnerability is a lot. And I've posted a picture here for non-ICS guys, like how the module looks like. It looks like something like this. Now, what we will do is we will try to map this vulnerability against the MITRE ATT&CK framework so that we can better understand the techniques and tactics that the attacker will use during the different stages of this cyber attack. So before diving into the MITRE ATT&CK framework, let's understand a little bit about the vulnerability. Like this vulnerability is affecting uh, the communication modules, the device that I was showing you earlier. And these are the two vulnerabilities. These are the numbers of two vulnerabilities. And the first vulnerability will allow the manipulation of the firmware. The second will allow cause a denial of service kind of situation. And so how the attacker is going to exploit this, the attack vector is network. It's a remote code execution, which means if the attacker gets a foothold in the network, he can go ahead and exploit this vulnerability. And there is this protocol called SIP, Common Industrial Protocol, which works on 2222 port or 44818 port numbers. And so using this common industrial protocol, the attacker can send a specifically crafted malicious packet to these modules, these PLCs, these devices, and then cause the impact. So that is about this vulnerability. And if if your this device or module is exposed to the internet, then the criticality of this vulnerability is becomes very severe, because then from the internet the attacker can straight away mm, exploit this vulnerability. Then the attack surface increases a lot. uh, there are industries, there are companies where cybersecurity is still not very strong in the ICS, and you will find such devices, industrial control system devices, exposed to the internet. It is not that uncommon. um, and Yeah, so that's about the vulnerability. In case if the device is not exposed to the internet, but still the vulnerability is very critical, because if your IT and the manufacturing network is not segmented properly using a proper firewall, then the attacker, if he manages to get entry into your IT network, then from there he can simply get into your OT network, into your production network. And these devices by default, uh, they do not have these intrinsic security features like authentication. So the attacker will not be asked for authentication, and he can do a remote code exploit on these devices. So that is the reason the criticality of these devices is this vulnerability is severe. So now that is about the vulnerability. Let's jump into the MITRE ATT&CK framework that we will use to populate some of the techniques that I think the attacker can use during the cyber attack of this vulnerability. So as I had told you in the previous video that MITRE attack framework is free to use to anybody. Here under the matrices, the enterprise is mostly for the IT organization. If a vulnerability is for the IT, then you will use this. Mobile, if the vulnerability is for mobile, you will use this. This vulnerability is related to ICS, that is Industrial Control System. That is the reason we will choose this matrix. And now this can be viewed for editing on Attack Navigator tool. So here I have pre-populated this before creating this video. This cannot be said exact because the, because the vulnerability is very new, and there were no uh, blogs that were giving a detailed information on this vulnerability. So that is the reason from the blogs, whatever I could find, I have put it together. And plus, I have a friend who is working um, as a digitization specialist. He has spent uh, quite a lot of time on the manufacturing side in the shop floor. So after discussing with him, sitting with him, I have populated this attack framework, and this is my understanding that this is how uh, the attack will be carried out. These are the stages and these are the techniques that the attacker will use. The initial access, it if the device is exposed to the internet, then this becomes the door. This is how the attacker will come in. If this is not, then the initial access can also be some other technique here. The attacker might send a phishing email, mm, and try to spear phishing attachment to a user, try to gain foothold in the network, and then try to move around into the network from the IT side to the OT side and exploit this vulnerability. So there can be multiple initial access vectors here, but for now I've taken this internet accessible device. And then in the execution, based on the understanding that the attacker will send this uh, the vulnerability that I was saying, that the attacker will use a common information, um, common industrial protocol message, and this SIP. He will use this technique. He will send a specifically crafted malicious packet using this protocol's port number over the network and try to exploit this vulnerability. That is the reason. Um, and and how the execution will happen is like change operating mode or modify controller tasks. uh, since I told you that there were no there are no blogs that are giving in-depth information how the execution would exactly happen. So that is the reason, based on my discussions with my friend and plus the research material that I read, and plus the reading about these different techniques under this execution stage, I have come to the conclusion that modify controller tasking is what is the technique for execution that the attackers will use. So here are the procedures. These are different malwares, different threat actors. These are the mitigations, and these are some of the detections listed here. So for yourself, you can do a deep dive into these techniques by going to MITRE ATT&CK website and try to uh, find out more on these techniques, how it will work. In persistence, I have mentioned hard-coded credentials, modify program, module firmware. The This is a out of the bound attack, which means outside the memory, the attacker can execute some codes. That is the reason he can create a persistence in the firmware itself by creating some additional tasks. So that is the reason I've mentioned it here. There is no need of privilege escalation here based on the research that is available. Um, there is no need for privilege escalation here. Plus, this another blog that I found here. It is mentioned that uh, the this 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 attack is very similar to a previous attack that was seen earlier by this group. And so by studying this xenotime attack, I have tried to populate the rest of the techniques that if the attack is similar to this xenotime, then these are some of the evasion techniques that it will use. This is some of the discovery that it would do based on some blogs from Tenable, based on some blogs from Rockwell itself. I've come to the conclusion that denial of service, device shutdown, these are some of the impact that the attacker will try to create. And using the common ports that are used in the SIP protocol, that is 2222 44818. Using this, it can send command and control information to these PLCs, to these devices, and then further create an impact. So one other mitigation technique is for this is like you can um, block the port 2222 and 44818, which is for used for this common industrial protocol on your firewall from the IT networks and from the internet. Usually, in an industrial control environment, you have the manufacturing stuff separated from the IT stuff by having a firewall in between. And on that firewall, then you can block these ports so that no threat emerging from IT passes on the manufacturing OT side. And plus from the internet, if you block these ports as well, that then if any of the devices are exposed to the internet by mistake, then that can be a good mitigation as well. So once again, populating uh, the MITRE ATT&CK framework for this vulnerability, mapping this vulnerability to MITRE ATT&CK framework has helped us to understand what could be our mitigation strategy, what techniques we need to look at when this vulnerability is taken into consideration, and these are some of the procedures and tactics that the attacker would use during this cyber attack and during the stages of this cyber attack. So I hope this short video was helpful on this vulnerability to you. In case if you need any more deep dive on any of these techniques or about this vulnerability, then um, do do comment and give a feedback. In the description, I will try to place this JSON file, which you can go ahead and use it here by this is the way how you can populate the uh, mm, the attack framework on your system. Then I will see if uh, this can be posted in the description. All right then. Thank you. I will see you in the next video.